We have been asked to do an extension of time resolution. It's actually 152, not 252. Are you sure we need it yet?
I'll approve an extension of time.
I'll second that.
What is my mistake?
Until the completion of business.
Yeah, until somebody has a heart attack or we finish. End of business. Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary? Oh, that's right. You're all going to stick with me. Recovery from the January floods and Cyclone Gabrielle covering report, please. Is anyone to present this? Yes. Handsome devil. Thank you.
Now I know you've got a sense of humour. Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to start by, observing, obviously you've got a very long agenda today, and I was going to make a suggestion that I move through this fairly quickly. I'm mindful that councillors may well have a number of questions about specific issues vis-a-vis recovery, storm damage, etc. in your areas. My suggestion would be that we do a briefing session offline on a different afternoon in recognition of the length of your agenda and the type of things that you might want to explore. I will, however, give you a sense of where we're up to. It's outlined in the report, which I'll take as read. Just have a short... No, I don't have a short presentation, but I will cope with that. Okay. So, if I just make a few high-level comments about where we're at with the recovery, we are getting well on top of the immediate and urgent matters that come from the January 27th and then Cyclone Gabrielle events. What that means, and I recognise my colleagues, including in the CCOs, in terms of a power of work that's been done in that regard. But what we've got now, of course, are the harder to resolve, more tricky issues in terms of infrastructure damage and the rest of it. So things are getting good progress, but things are getting more difficult at this point. We have stood up a recovery function. We have taken a building of a floor of Albert Street, level 8, if anyone's interested at some point in coming down and having a look. We've focused on bringing together all of the key players who need to be involved in the recovery effort. That includes CCOs, infrastructure people, a number of government agencies, including Waka Kotahi, MSD, and so forth, but as well, very significantly, a number of people from around the organisation, including those doing the building assessment work, the geotech work, the welfare outreach effort, the communications effort. So it's taken shape pretty well. We're at a point now where we've almost kind of exploited all of the people that we can grab out of the organisation on a redeployment secondment type basis to do certain jobs, and now need to backfill in a number of specialist areas through contracting people in. I'm referencing specialist skill sets such as geotech engineering and such like. So we're in good shape in terms of where the function is at. In terms of what they're working on, it's fair to say that, a month or two, you've got the... Thank you, Sandra. In terms of where we're at, now it's not going to work for me. I think I'm just going to carry on. In terms of where we're at, community-wise, we're at that difficult point now, and we will be for some time, where people who are affected in our community are tired. They're distressed about their situation. They don't have certainty, where they're red and yellow stickered in terms of what the time frame is for them to move on with their lives, be compensated, understand whether they're necessarily going to be relocated, able to rebuild homes and what have you. So that, in a nutshell, is the focus for us. I've described it in on my notes as trying to achieve as much certainty with speed as we possibly can for those people, and that's the ethos in the recovery effort. I think from other sources, you're reasonably familiar with the numbers here, but just to remind, we do have in the region of 500 red stickered properties. Something north of 2,000 yellow stickered properties. That was traversed earlier in the rate relief conversation, and then a large number of white placarded properties. We are methodically working through with those people what their different scenarios are. There is frustration about how fast that can happen, but we're trying to accelerate it now. We're trying to personalise the communication with them so that we can take more of a case management approach, if you like. That's what people want from us. We're prioritising a number of, areas, most obviously places like Muriwai, where there is a concentration of quite significant effect, but not only Muriwai, it's in places all around the region. Putting mechanisms in place such as a regular communications newsletter that's bespoke for those areas, putting senior people in as key contacts, and I could go on, but there's a bespoke arrangement being developed in relation to a lot of those key priority areas. I just finally, and I won't repeat everything that's on the slide there, I just want to note a couple of things for your attention. There was a reference made earlier to civil defence payments. One of the special initiatives that the government took to make some funds available for the community. Councillor Bartley, I think you mentioned that and were quite correct that those are planned to come off for the 31st of March. There is a live discussion around that. There's been a total of $25.5 million given to our community in recognition of their hardship situations. I won't go into detail. There's a bit of a profile in terms of the use of those for accommodation and food and other hardship reasons. The simple point is there is still a tail to that in the community, and therefore a concern about those coming off. So there's a discussion with central government required about whether they're adequately standing to meet the needs of the community in that regard through other mechanisms. The problem, of course, is that a lot of our residents are not they're not normally MSD clients. These were not MEND-tested arrangements, and so there's a question about whether they're going to be backfilled with something that's appropriate for the needs of some of our community who are not regular MSD clients. There's a particular challenge in relation to temporary accommodation. The numbers of people in temporary accommodation have continued to rise. That's a function of people being displaced and then temporarily being able to be accommodated with friends and family and what have you, but people are still coming out of the woodwork in that regard and requiring assistance in terms of alternate accommodation. So we're monitoring that quite carefully. We're going to have to look at, in some cases, some quite bespoke arrangements. You know, one that I use to illustrate this point is the potential for Portacom accommodation at Muriwai for people who want to stay in that community, but in absence of alternate rental accommodation and such like. these are the types of situations that we're dealing with now. Your Worship, I would probably not for discussion now, but I do need to indicate to you that, of course, we're starting to get the first inquiries on a legal, from a legal perspective in terms of liability. People challenging whether council is somehow liable for costs associated for private property damage that's adjacent to council land and such like. So that's something that I think, rather than here, we give you a particular brief on in due course. But we're seeing the start of that process that will probably carry on for quite some time. That was a bit messy, apologies, Your Worship, but...
no, it's very impressive, and I'd like to thank you for stepping into that work and making such a good job of it, actually. Well done. I think we all feel that way. I've got a couple of things. There's nothing like getting a few quick wins at a time like this, or otherwise it looks like we're just doing a talk fest. With regard to the geotech, obviously it's of extreme value in places like the Muriwai thing, where there are good houses on land that look like it might be moving, and we've just got to see whether or not they can go back there. And that's absolutely essential. But where people have built on top of cliffs, which are clearly a geotechnical risk, I don't know what involvement are we doing there, because basically that's something that they should pay themselves, in my view.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I mean, practically what we're doing is, I say we, and I can't see that my colleague Craig's still here, but we're going through each of the stickered properties doing reassessments. That's meant that we've been in the fortunate position in the last week to 10 days of being able to, having reassessed them, remove a number of red stickers. There are a number of very relieved people in Muriwai, for example, in that regard. But not only there, we're going through doing those reassessments. There is most certainly a judgment to be made about whether there is a residual risk that causes us to will cause us to have conversations about whether those properties are viable going forward. And what we're trying to do is methodically go through the list and identify all those properties where there's reasonable certainty that it will be unwise to rebuild them. That gives us a foundation for a discussion with central government about, and with insurers and with EQC about the compensation arrangements that might be required to do the managed retreat decisions around not rebuilding certain areas. So that, as you'll well understand, is pretty tricky territory, and we need to have a good foundation for it in terms of the quality of our information about those properties, and really good alignment with central government about how that arrangement will work and who pays what.
I'm pleased to hear that. That's definitely tricky and risky. We are taking a financial risk because some people chose to take a physical risk, and so I'm pleased to hear you treading carefully there. We have got geotechnical stuff. I'm particularly interested to know how we're getting on with some of the fluid mechanics or stormwater assessments. For instance, in the Swanson area and Shane Anderson's area and Containers, there's a number of small catchments there that are heavily overgrown with probably some ill-advised green planting in them. That will affect a lot of houses there. An assessment at some stage or other is whether it's worthwhile clearing out all of that vegetation. I've been out there and there's some vegetation being cleared, but it's like cutting only the quarter of your hair for those that have got here. The small amount that's being done now won't do any help. You either clean them out or you don't, and that's a pretty tough question. but it will determine whether or not those houses are worth being restored or not. So that's another area to follow. It's kind of like a not quite geotechnical. It's fluid mechanics really. Have we got sufficient skill sets in there? I'm a great believer in the skill sets of the senior guys in Healthy Waters. They impress me a lot, but they're pretty heavily worked.
Well, I think, Your Worship, that's a good summary. We've got very good capacity in there, but we've got a very big job to do as well. So we're at, as I mentioned, we're at that point where we need to look at bringing in some complementary skill sets, which will cost a little bit of money. I would suggest that that's probably territory for us to bring Craig McElroy through to speak to you when we do a more detailed briefing. But I should have made the point earlier. There is a resolution I'm seeking on the order paper for your approval around budget of up to $3 million before the end of the financial year, and it's exactly for that type of specialist input and the other direct costs in terms of running the recovery operation through to the end of June that relates to.
Yeah, well said. I've got some questions, but I think that we should definitely take note of the fact that you are asking for some, and there are some circumstances even where you don't have a lot of money, where you've just got to spend it for the better good, and this is one of them. So, Councillor Ferry first, please.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Phil, and I feel really heartened to get these kinds of analyses from you and the team, and I really, really appreciate that, and knowing that you're on the spot there as you were right through all those emergency briefings with us in the immediate aftermath is really, I hesitate to say good because we're not in a good spot, but yeah, it's one of the good things in a not so great situation. But my question, and actually it may not be for you, so forgive me, but it may be that the Mayor can answer this or Councillor Stewart. When are we expecting the Bush review to come out? Because it was supposed to be the beginning of March, and then we were told it was delayed to mid-March, but we haven't been given a time frame yet. Thank you.
Max has just said he's hoping to give an updated time frame tomorrow, but not now. Oh, it's not either up to him or to me. I believe that it's in the hands of the reviewer, but Max just said that's the latest of what we know. So, okay.
That's what I've been told as well, yeah.
Sorry, we don't have so we have a time frame on when we'll know a time frame, but we don't, are we talking about 2 weeks, 3 months? Do we have any
Well,
sense?
I think probably tomorrow they'll be able to tell us what time frame we're going to receive it. It'll probably be sometime next week, but I can't give you an actual date.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you. That's fine. Sorry, Phil.
Councillor Walker, please.
Just be really quick, Phil. So within our recovery, are we actively identifying the maintenance stuff that needs to be done? And in particular, I'm talking about cleaning out streams, issues where you've got, frankly, catastrophes waiting to happen that people are acutely aware of and suffering any amount of anxiety. And certainly just reinforcing that, some of the major flooding that occurred in catchments in our ward, that's the Albany ward, Browns Bay, Stanmore Bay, elsewhere, was caused through blockages, debris blockages that could and should have been avoided. And people are acutely aware of that and worried because they still see the same underlying problem. They're really worried. So that's one issue I just want to raise. And the other issue that runs with that is around modelling, so that people in communities have got better information around what happens in a storm event with given levels of rainfall associated with given levels of tide, so that they actually know. Because right now, the stuff's out of date, and they don't know. And again, they're really scared. So a couple of things there.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. And Barry's just come in, so he might add to this if I if I get this completely wrong, but basically, yes, there is a proactive maintenance program, and that it's fair to say that's been through the preparation for Cyclone Gabriel and beyond. That's been quite a focus point for our Healthy Waters team and others. There is what's happening under the recovery umbrella is that there is a joined up infrastructure program with Watercare, Healthy Waters, Auckland Transport, Waka Kotahi, and others, and they are prioritising the remedial work that's required in terms of fix-ups, and it'll tie into the maintenance schedule as well. To your point about modelling, actually we have pretty good stormwater modelling, risk modelling. Yes, it's an ongoing piece of work, and that's been going. They are going through that with a fine-tooth comb at the moment to identify the seriously at-risk areas. So we've got that information set that will help inform decisions around repair or relocate. Probably worth pointing out at this time that the area where our information is less mature is in the landslip risk area. So there's quite a body of work that I think we should discuss in due course around what we need to do in that space to fully understand the landslip risks, where they are, and what might be done to mitigate.
The last comment comes across to communities that I'm engaged with, and John, and that's the reputational risk where people see around them subdivisions, developments that are being consented now that they know aggravate the risk and the flooding to locations where they live. And they're really scared, and they point the finger at us and say, how can you be allowing this, especially through the likes of the COVID fast-track legislation and the like. You've got some really bad stuff happening. So again, I don't know whether it's within recovery, but this is the sort of thing that people are concerned about right now.
Look, obviously this is quite big territory, and we won't get into it too deeply now, but we're aware of that. I think it's only right to observe actually that a lot of our newer developments have performed quite well in terms of stormwater, but a lot of them have. There is clearly a need for us to look longer term at our planning framework. That's been the subject of other reports and discussions in a different committee. Suffice to say that what we look at in the next 12 months in terms of the recovery program needs to dovetail well into those longer term decisions and what will come back to you in terms of any changes in the planning framework based on risk. So very mindful of that, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, and it's really good to hear this stuff. Just the clearing of the rivers and all that sort of stuff, I just want to, maybe not necessarily here, but it's kind of just how we let the recovery lead forward into, ongoing maintenance. I heard a thing on the radio, it was sent to me on Radio NZ. A council Healthy Waters person was saying we would never clean all the streams in Auckland ever. There's 17,000 kilometres of urban stream. So I had a meeting with him. One tree fallen, one big log fallen into the river, which was pulled out by helicopter for health and safety issues. $60,000. People saw it operating the other day, and I had that confirmed by this staffer. My point is that I just want to make sure that somewhere in this mix we get over the hurdle, which is handicapping our maintenance and handicapping our recover, which is self-imposed cost. So if I could meet someone, if we could talk about that, whatever, but that's my concern. Thank you.
Councillor, let's come back to that in the briefing, and we'll have the Healthy Waters folk there.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Phil, and again, very much appreciate all that you have been and continue to do, and I'm absolutely happy to support B. My question to you is, are we doing all we can in the space of trauma support, mental health support for the affected people?
In all honesty, probably not, although, clearly there are big, there's an aspect of this which is not really in council's ballpark. It requires kind of health services and central government to step in there. What I'm hearing a lot is the shortfalls, the lack of capacity in the mental health area to provide for on-the-ground support. What we are doing, however, is our welfare function is going out, having regular discussions with the affected people, and we've got to step that up a little bit more so, because it, clearly it changes from week to week for members of the community. Frankly, I'm concerned that having identified the need, we're not going to have the ability through mental health professional support to fill it. That's a wider kind of societal problem, frankly, than just this recovery. That's what we're hitting up against.
Well, I get that, and I think perhaps we could write to central government about that for some, some direct support. And just finally, are you okay? Because it's okay not to be okay.
I'm remarkably resilient, me. How else would I have worked with you for so long? Yeah.
Oh, that's a classic answer.
Jay. Councillor Henderson from Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm actually from Te Atatu, but I'll point that out publicly. I've got two questions. So this work on managed retreat and buyouts, that's heavy, huge policy work and really wide-ranging and generational stuff. Obviously we've got fantastic people within our organisation that can handle this stuff, but I'm wondering whether we're considering outside help, other council, central government to bolster that work, because it's quite large.
Sorry, Councillor, the specific...
managed retreat and buyouts. Yeah, yes. A lot of policy work involved.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I think we can get our heads around how a system around this might work. And I can tell you that the discussions with central government and ministers has already started around that. They are themselves looking at it. I think the reality for us is that in terms of central government contributions to those solutions, they will want to be reasonably equitable across the country, given what's happened in the Hawke's Bay and Tairāwhiti and what have you. So the ball is significantly in central government's court. What I'm doing, what the Mayor is doing, is impressing upon government the need for speed in terms of getting to those understandings. Yeah, so I think a lot of the policy work is actually with central government, to be frank.
Thank you very much, I appreciate that. My final question is, in terms of drain clearing, I was recently made aware of just how expensive it is to clear streams and the like around the city. We're probably going to need to try and minimise our costs as much as possible so we can do more. I'm wondering if we're contemplating enabling volunteers and community groups to pick up some of that work with sufficient health and safety.
I don't have the detail to answer that question. I'll take it on advisement. I'm sure there's some potential there. There are a lot of voluntary groups. There is a lot of voluntary effort doing work in all sort of spheres, environmental management, pest control and what have you, and there's probably stuff that relates. But let me come back to you on that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks, Mayor.
Yeah, good questions. I have impressed upon the Prime Minister the importance of leadership from him across the government, across the whole country, to have equitable and timely solutions for managed retreat. There are some people clutching that as a bit of a straw at this stage, but we can't set any trends which might accidentally reverberate right across New Zealand. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Wilson. Last Friday, I attended a briefing led by Mr. McElroy and Mr. Viggers of Healthy Waters at her invitation at the office of one of the local MPs, the senior one. And I can say that Mr. McElroy did not wear his hat as a personal favour for old time's sake, which made the briefing more effective. And the strategy was outlined to the local MP, who was extremely interested in the detail of it, and the idea of managed retreat was floated, and the possibility of government funding. The local MP was entirely supportive of the idea, but then raised the question, but downstream in the same floodplain, the council is currently dealing with an application for 12 intensive houses in the same area. And how would the Crown react if the Crown were aware that, on the one hand, Auckland Council is asking money for this major and I think very sensible strategic initiative, but at the same time another arm of the council is still entertaining an application for an intensive development in the same very area, which will more than likely be vulnerable to the same sort of flooding, which actually occurred on that property on the 27th of January. So my question is, this is a very big deal what you're talking about here, not just financially, but in terms of a strategic turnaround from the era where we still probably are in of, you can build anywhere. That's a very permissive approach to housing developments and intensive housing developments. It seems to me that the whole council needs to align itself. Otherwise, if the council goes to Wellington, the government may get the impression that we have a split personality. And I think we just need to line up the whole council strategically, because it seems to me that those storms of 27th of January and Cyclone Danielle are a complete sea change in the way we need to do things in Auckland.
I really just have to take that on advice, Councillor. I think you're exactly right. This consideration can and should feed directly into some planning and regulatory decisions. Question of doing enough work to justify those changes and get them done quickly.
And carefully. I think we're going to move from a regime of building anything anywhere. It doesn't stop us building some things in risky areas as long as they're designed along the approach that they are risky areas. I think a lot of the people have got into trouble in low flat floodplains in houses where they hadn't thought they were in a low flat floodplain, but you can actually build houses in low flat floodplains up 2 metres off the ground or do something or other to it. So it's the whole managed retreat is a dead tricky area there, and I think we should be following the government rather than leading them. And the next person is John Watson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Phil, just in amongst all this, additional resource and what we've already committed to through Healthy Waters and Water Care, I just want to check that at the end of it or during it, or as we go along, that this will enable us to capture all the many and varied events that happen. So, for instance, even now I'm getting people coming up with video clips of this location and this happened there. So there's people sitting on stuff that just shows you exactly what happened during the storm event. That hasn't necessarily been conveyed to anyone yet. Some of the bad areas obviously have. So with this resourcing and this response, I'm assuming we will be able to get down to the detail of the catch pit on the corner of these two roads that overflowed and went through these people's property and happened like that back in November, as well as the business area that had this history of events leading up to the flood event. So it's going to be that type of detailed analysis and then response or action that will follow from it. I'm just trying to get a very pragmatic understanding, because that's certainly the experience across my ward in particular.
Yes, I think you're entirely right. There are certainly situations, concerns still coming out of the woodwork that need to be actioned. I think one interesting illustration of that is having a look at the insurance data, and clearly there are insurance claims for properties that have not been on our radar from a stickering point of view, i.e. the householder has not reported them, and therefore they're not showing up, or at least not yet in terms of yellow and red stickers. It's an illustration of something a little bit below the surface, excuse the pun.
Question, and last but not least, Sharon Stewart.
Thank you for that. Just unfortunately, since the amalgamation of the 7 councils, I think most of us have seen things gone really backwards. When I was part of Manukau Council, we used to sweep the streets a lot more often and clear the drains. A lot of money's actually been spent on a lot of things that are the nice haves and not the things that are the things that really count and really important. And for a long time, I've been banging on since about 2002, 2004, when I got ordered in New Zealand. Bernard Hickey did a really good he's a very good investigative reporter, that Bernard Hickey, and he did a very good report on, all the flooding and the stormwaters that have just happened. And, back in when Nelson had their flooding, I actually said it's going to happen in Auckland, and we're going to have to be really, really careful. So one of the things that I think we should really be doing, and it's something I've been talking to Craig McElroy about, is that we do need to go back to having like the Task Force Green. I'm sure you all remember Task Force Green, and that was really good. They used to go and clear the streams, and we had the PD workers, and we could have people that are working for the dole and things like that. We could actually have people that are out there doing things in the community. I lived in Singapore for a number of years, from 91 to 93, and over there, they always had people out there working. That had people that would be mowing the streets or the cutting the grass and just making sure that the infrastructure was being looked after. And unfortunately, I think since the amalgamation, we've really, really let things go. And so I welcome whatever we can do to assist. And I think this the $3 million of unbudgeted costs is something that we really need to look at. But I think there's a whole lot of things that we could actually be doing as well. And I'd really hope that the government would look at going back to Task Force Green and PD workers and community groups, because some of these streams are private streams, they're not all public streams. So, and unfortunately, a lot of the stormwater that's going into a lot of these streams, it's caused all this problem. It's come from all this infill housing.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Very good points. Okay. We have a recommendation to receive the report and approve.
Councillor Simpson,
Moved and seconded by Walker. Right, I'm just going to read it out there. Can you just get that out of the road so I can read it again? An upper limit of $3 million of unbudgeted costs. And nobody wants to bloody face this, and I'm sure there'll be people asking where it's going to come from, but just at the moment you just have to do it. and it was sorted out. Beg your pardon?
It's this financial year, though, isn't it? It's this financial year, not next. Yeah.
I realise that. It's nobody wants to do it, but we've got to do this, and so, in my view, so it's been moved and seconded. Councillor Filipina. Off you go, Councillor Filipina, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a few minutes to say thank you to you, Phil, but also to Auckland Emergency Management. And I know that Councillor Lotu and others have sort of said thank you to all the staff involved in the flood. So I just wanted to sort of say that personally and say, Your Worship, that I fully support the recommendation. Kia ora.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, and I think we all recognise that Phil has picked up this ball and running very well with it, and we've thanked him for that. So I'm going to put this motion. Please, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary? No. Thank you, carried. We've got two more largely information, I hope,